we're going to get started here. Welcome to the LA Superior Court Judicial Candidate Forum. Oh, I'm alive, yay. The League of Women Voters of Los Angeles County is composed of 12 local leagues. It's a nonpartisan political organization whose purpose is to promote the informed and active participation of citizens in government. We put on candidates forums as part of our voter service activity so that people can listen to and question the people vying to represent them in county government. Our county government is supposed to provide services to residents and structure and planning for the effective operation and development of the county and its residents. Los Angeles Superior Court judges are elected locally or appointed by the governor to 6-year terms. All candidates running for the 7 seats have 6-year terms, and they've been invited to participate this evening. They've agreed to abide by the rules sent out in the invitation. This is an opportunity for constituents to learn more about the candidates before casting their ballots on the June 7th primary election. Voters can look up more information about candidates running for office in LA County by going to votersedge.org. I'd like to introduce Judge Mark Borenstein and tell you a little bit about him. Judge Borenstein was appointed to the Los Angeles Superior Court in March 2009, where he currently presides in Edmund D. Edelman's Children's Court. Prior to his appointment, Judge Borenstein practiced law in state and federal courts for 30 years, specializing in complex civil litigation. He co-founded Overland, Borenstein, Shepard, and Kim, formerly Overland and Borenstein, and was a partner at Tuttle & Taylor Law Corporation in Los Angeles. While practicing, Judge Borenstein also taught civil procedure and advanced civil procedure at the University of Southern California Gould School of Law. Judge Borenstein served as a law clerk to the Honorable Irving Hill, United States District Court, Los Angeles from 1976 to 1977. He earned his JD from George Washington University School of Law and a bachelor's degree from the University of Buffalo, graduating with honors from both schools. Judge Borenstein also holds a Master of Law degree from Georgetown University Law Center. He's going to tell us a little bit about the Judicial Court. Welcome, Judge Borenstein.
Thank you all very much. Thanks to the Pat Brown Institute and Cal State LA and the League of Women Voters for inviting me here today. I wanted to describe a little bit about the Los Angeles County judicial system and then talk a little bit about why we even have judges' elections. First, Los Angeles County is the largest trial court system in the United States. Some people say the world. There are more than 40 courthouses and almost 500 judges and another 100 commissioners who are like judges. Currently, there are 18 vacancies in Los Angeles County. Among the there are actually 483 judicial positions. I'm a judge, not anymore at the Children's Court, although I was for a long time across the street from here at Edelman. I'm a judge in the downtown Mosque Civil Courthouse at between Hill and Grand on First Street, and I have currently a civil court assignment, which is basically disputes between people or companies about money or property. I was a criminal court judge. I was a family court judge. There are currently 18 vacancies among all of the 483 judges in Los Angeles. Of the 18 vacancies, 4 are going to be filled by election, and I'll explain why in a moment. And there are 3 other elections for judges for a different reason, which I'll also explain. So why are there judicial elections? That is in part a procedural, the answer of which is in part a procedural issue and in part a deeply philosophical issue about the role of government. As I'll explain, most vacancies on the Los Angeles Superior Court and all of the courts throughout California are filled by appointment by Governor Brown or by whoever the sitting governor is. Those people are appointed after their names are sent to a constitutional commission, which vets the potential candidate for judge and then makes a recommendation to the governor. The governor is free to follow or reject the recommendation. It is ultimately the governor's decision who should be appointed to the Superior Court. Once you're appointed, every 6 years, that's the length of your term, you run for re-election in an election. This year there are, although you won't see it on the ballot, 161 judicial elections. Of the 161, almost all of them will not appear on the ballot, including me. I'm up for election this year too. I'm in office 77. But you won't see my name on the ballot because no one decided to run against me. And so the assumption is I'll vote for myself, and so I will get automatically elected to another 6-year term. Running for election is not something I would want to do, and I really do honor these people, the candidates before you, because it is not an easy thing to do to run for election in Los Angeles County. Now, I said that there are 4 seats that are open, and they are open because the judge who occupied those 4 judges who occupied those offices decided to retire or leave the bench during the election year. So the governor wasn't able to appoint people to those 4 positions, and hence you have 4 what's called open seats. An open seat is where there is no incumbent judge also running. And so of the 161 judge races, you'll only see 4 open seats on the ballot come June 7th. Imagine if you had to vote 170 times every 2 years for a judge. The other elections that are here is 3 additional elections where the incumbent judge, the judge who, like me, has been a judge and was appointed by the governor, I think they've been all appointed by the governor, is challenged by 1 or more candidates. And when they're challenged by 1 or more candidates, that creates a contested election where the current sitting judge and the challenger are, a challenger or challengers are engaged in an election. And I think you'll hear from candidates tonight who are both running for open seats where there is no judge running and contested elections where there is. Now, why do we have elections? I said it's procedurally it's because there are open seats and there are seats where judges are challenged, but it is really a much more philosophical question that implicates how each state decides to create a judiciary, a third branch of the government. Some states don't have any elections at all for their judges. Judges are appointed either by the governor or by a judicial nominating committee. One state like that is Delaware. You won't see judicial elections in Delaware. Other states take the completely opposite view, where all judges should be elected. Sometimes in partisan elections, like in Alabama, where judges run as Democrats or Republicans or independents, along with the senator and the congressman, the local committeeman, all of the other persons in office. Or some states like Texas elect all of their judges, but they're all in nonpartisan elections, so they're not, the candidates are not designated as Democrats or Republicans. Many states have a hybrid system where the governor, with or without a nominating committee, appoints judges subject to the appointed judge running for a retention election in a year or 2 or sometime shortly after that person is appointed. California has a similar system to that. Most judges are appointed and then they have to run for a retention election within 2 years after their appointment. So Whether judges are elected or whether they are appointed is a deeply political question, contrasting the right to elect public officials, like your congressmen and your senators and your presidents and your supervisors, with the conflicts that a voter may perceive when judges need to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars in campaign contributions in order to run in the largest county in the United States. That implicates the appearance for some voters of shading the impartiality of a judge who has to run and yet raise money from the very litigants that the judge presides over. We have, and in our system, our Constitution in 1850 selected the hybrid system that still requires, in some cases, judges to run countywide in contested elections, either because a judge is challenged or because there is an open seat. But what does it mean to run for election as a judge in Los Angeles County? Well, it's an incredibly huge undertaking. And I admire these people, I admire the candidates for having decided to undertake that challenge, that job. Judges are elected county-wide. That means that only judges, the district attorney, the sheriff, and the assessor face election by all of the voters of Los Angeles County. In contrast to the Los Angeles City Council, where you elect councilmen by councilmanic districts, much smaller subdivisions, or even the Board of Supervisors, who are elected to supervise supervisorial districts. Judges, the sheriff, the district attorney, and the assessor, we all run countywide. And what does that mean? It means that there are over 10 million people who are in our county, which makes it by far the largest county in the country. The next largest county in the country is Cook County, Illinois, which has just about half the number of people that we in Los Angeles County have. So, Los Angeles County has elections for judge and sheriff and county assessor with more people than all but 8 other states. It is a huge undertaking. So you might see on election day that the same number of voters who vote for judge in Los Angeles County would be enough to be elected governor of North Carolina, if you wanted to do that. So how do you go about evaluating who to vote for as a judge in Los Angeles County? Well, as big a job it is for the candidates, it's an enormous job for the voters, because while there are many sources of information, you actually have to go out and find them. And once you find them, I think there are many ways to decide who you think embodies your judicial philosophy and should be elected. The Los Angeles County Bar Association evaluates candidates that are willing to be evaluated. Their website, lacba.org, lists the candidates and rates them. They have a committee that rates them as exceptionally well qualified, qualified, not qualified, and they explain how they rate each of the candidates. The Bar Association has a full report detailing the standards they use and why some candidates were rated not qualified. The LA Times endorses, after meeting with the candidates that wish to meet with their editorial board. There is a legal newspaper called the Metropolitan News, which also meets with the candidates and makes endorsements. And many of the candidates themselves have websites that have information about them. They can purchase for, I don't know, I think it's probably about $100,000 or $90,000, a page in the voter pamphlet. Some do, some don't. So it takes some effort on part of a voter to find out, and your presence here is a real testament to you that you want to hear from the candidates themselves to help decide how you're going to vote on June 7th. While I urge you to look at all of these sources of information to try to discern who is the candidate for what office that you want to vote for, I urge you not to decide solely based on the 3-word description that each candidate chooses and appears on the ballot. Take the time to decide based on all of the information that you can collect, and then decide who is qualified and who best describes your philosophy about how our judicial branch of government should operate. So I thank you very much for this brief introduction. Did I take too long?
No, you did wonderful.
Oh, okay. All right. Good luck. Thank you, and good luck to the candidates.
Thank you, Judge Bornstein. Change here so you know who I am. No offense. See if he'll stay up. Well, now that you have a little bit of an idea about how the system works, let's get started. So first I'm going to describe how the event is going to run and introduce a few key people. My name is Fatima Malik. I am a director with the League of Women Voters of Los Angeles County. We have the candidates here for office number 11 seated to the left. We have Deborah Archuleta. Paul Kim is not here. You'll see his name tag there. And Stephen Schreiner. For candidates for the office number 42 are also seated to left. E. Matthew, and pardon me if I say names incorrectly, you can correct me. E. Matthew Aceves, Alicia Molina, Aaron Weissman, and Cindy Zuzga. Did I get everybody? Great. No? Did somebody sit down? Oh, I did.
Raise your hand.
You snuck in there. Michael Ribbons.
Yeah, there's no Aaron Weiss.
Aaron's in another office.
Oh, okay. Well, that's okay. Errors do happen. So we'll begin the evening by giving each candidate 1 minute to answer a question. The question will be, what personal qualities and experiences best equipped you to serve as a Superior Court judge? Following the opening statements, candidates will answer questions posed by a student panel, which are over here to my left as well. We have Lorena Montero, a member of the Criminal Justice Student Association, LaJazz Brooks, a member of the Political Science Student Association, and Erlyn Narajos, a member of the Pre-Law Society. Audience members may submit written questions to the candidates, which will be screened for civility, clarity, and compliance with election code for judges. When you first walked in, there were cards and pencils. Hopefully you had a chance to grab one. If you don't have one, raise your hand and we'll provide you with a card and a pencil. And then once you've written your question down, you can raise your hand again and we'll pass it down to one end. So I think we have one person here who needs a card and a pencil. Our timekeepers, well, our question sorter is Linda Paquette from the League of Women Voters. Timekeepers are Eleanor Wright, and we have student volunteers here helping out as well. Hi, Crystal. Crystal will be helping us time. Panel questions will allow 90 seconds each, and all will respond. Audience questions must be written. Answers are limited to 1 minute each. When you do write your questions, please make sure that it is a question that's directed towards all the candidates and not just one. So make sure the question is general enough that all of them can answer. If you have any questions, you can reach out to one of the league members here in the front and they can help you figure out how to put your question together. So thank you very much for all the candidates for participating in this forum. and all the other candidates who will be coming in later tonight as well. So let's start off with the first question that all of them will have 1 minute to answer. Once again, what personal qualities and experience best equip you to serve as a Superior Court judge? Ms. Archuleta?
Oh, yes, thank you. I like to stand. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to Judge Borenstein, the League of Women Voters, and Cal State LA for sponsoring this event for all of us. With regard to the personal qualities that I possess, I have been a prosecutor for 25 years, and during that professional experience, I have served in a variety of capacities. I served 3 years in the gang unit, but I primarily spent the majority of my career advocating on behalf of victims of domestic violence, homicide, sexual assault, child molestation, child abuse, stalking, elder abuse, and financial crimes. So while being in the district attorney's office for 25 years, I've been married. Do I have 15 seconds left? Yeah. Oh. I've raised 2 kids. I've had to make a lot of decisions in my life as a wife, a mother, a prosecutor, and a daughter. And I reflect the diversity that's needed in Los Angeles County on the bench when I look out in the courtrooms every day. I'm a member of that community, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Schreiner?
I'll try to make it fast. I wanted to thank the League of Women Voters and the students pre-law at Cal State LA. In terms of the qualities that I bring, I believe that I've acquired the judgment and as well as the legal knowledge, as well as the ability to judge each individual case fairly. In the course of the 29 years I've been a DA, I've tried 219 felony jury trials and 81 homicide cases during that time, and I'm able to distinguish between the really dangerous people and the people who are not to that degree. In the course of doing that, in addition to the experience I've acquired, the LA County Bar Association has rated me well qualified for this, and I've asked for your support on June 7th. Thank you.
All right, and now for office number 42, Mr. Aceves.
Thank you. It's Aceves, and thank you, everybody. I'm not going to go into specifics, but thank you. And in terms of the qualities that I have and my experience, I've been at the district attorney's office for almost 18 years. In that time, I've had a very distinguished career. I've done over 100 jury trials. Many of the trials that I've tried have been very serious cases. I've been assigned cases that have been have a lot of media attention. I urge all of you to go to my website, acevesforjudge.com, where you can learn more about me, more about the cases that I've done. In addition to being at the district attorney's office and being entrusted with very serious cases, I'm also the president of a school board. I've been representing the schools that I attended as a child for the last 11 years. I really bring a lot to the table when it comes to the experience in the courtroom and real life experience. I've also been rated well qualified by the Los Angeles County Bar, and I really feel that, given my background, I bring a lot to the table in terms of diversity and experience, and hopefully I'll be hearing from you and seeing you visit my website. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aceves. Ms. Molina.
Hi. I believe that I am a good candidate for this position because I'm not your typical judicial candidate. I am not a prosecutor. I come from the community. I've worked 14 years at a nonprofit in Boyle Heights, helping low-income people and underrepresented individuals doing immigration, doing domestic violence. I currently have my own law office in Huntington Park where I help low-income and underrepresented people. I also volunteer at the Harriet Buhai Center. I think it's important that you have diversity on the bench, also in the legal area, because we need people who understand the community, who understand the socioeconomic factors, and people who are going to have compassion when they have people in front of them. I think we need to be tough on crime, but we also need to give people second chances, alternative sentencing, rehabilitation when it is necessary. So if you want someone that's going to provide some change and is going to be following the justice for everybody, then I'm your candidate.
Thank you, Ms. Molina. Next, Mr. Ribbons.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters and the other sponsors of this evening. I am a civil attorney. I also do not come from the prosecutor's office. I've sat on the bench for approximately 300 calendars as a temporary judge, hearing all types of matters from traffic to civil harassment matters. So I'm well versed in the operations of the court as a judicial officer, as well as making tough decisions based on the facts in front of me. I've represented people from all walks of life, both as plaintiffs and defendants, and I believe that breadth of knowledge, together with my volunteer work with the courts, as well as the City of Los Angeles, provide for a well-suited, rounded candidate for this judicial office. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ribbons. Ms. Zuzka.
Good evening, thank you. I'm a Superior Court Commissioner, and I have served on the bench for over 10 years, and I make important decisions that affect people's lives. I listen to cases, keep an open mind, and make well-balanced decisions. I preside over a teen court, which is a restorative justice program in which a teen is judged by a jury of his or her peers. I have 20 years over as a prosecutor, and I developed the elder abuse section of the district attorney's office to include scams against seniors, our most vulnerable population. I opened the first realignment post-conviction parole hearing court in the state, and I brought in mental health social workers, I brought in substance abuse counselors, parole agents, and probation officers to help individuals successfully reintegrate into society. Thank you for your time, and thank you for considering my candidacy.
Thank you, Ms. Zuzka. So now that we have the opening statements, we'll have the candidates answer from the student panel. They'll have 90 seconds to respond, and the first candidate to answer the question will be Mr. Schreiner. And so we'll start with Lorena Montero, who will ask the first question.
Okay. So our question is, who are your judicial role models and why? Who are your judicial models and why?
Well, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the LA County judges who we appeared in front of, but if you're asking about the role models that I would point to, the trial judges who I appeared in front of over the years, particularly in Long Beach, Judge Art Jean was one of the best in terms of being the most efficient, because that's part of what you have to do, and still giving people a fair trial at the same time. Probably Margaret Hay and Joan Casani were two of the best that I appeared in front of in terms of having really detailed legal knowledge, because one of the things that you learn over the course of time you work as an attorney in court, you sort of start out thinking, well, they're judges, they know everything, and then as you go further in your career, you realize, well, they don't necessarily know everything, and then you start to think, well, maybe I can do this as well, too. And the people who really have greatly detailed legal knowledge are a rarity, so those are the ones I came to respect for those reasons.
Thank you, Mr. Schreiner. Mr. Aceves.
Thank you. I would point to three different judges that I really like the style, and it's really, they bring different things to the bench. One of them is Judge Marcus in downtown Los Angeles. I really like how he's really personable. When people come in to the courtroom, when the jury comes in, he really makes them feel comfortable, makes people know that it's a very important duty being a juror, and I really like how he treats the jurors and makes everyone feel comfortable. Once I'm in trial, I really enjoy how Judge Sagoon, Raul Sagoon in Norwalk, handles trials. I think he's always very well prepared. He's someone who's going to be fair. I like that he's serious on the bench, and that he's willing to listen to both sides. If you submit written documents, he's going to read them and really weigh both sides fairly. So I really like how he handles his trials. And then I also like some of the work that Judge Peter Espinoza in Norwalk also does. And basically, he's one of the judges who's been pioneering a lot of the alternative sentencing. We have a program in Norwalk where it's called Court to College, and he basically pioneered that. I thought that was really courageous of him. And now that we've seen that the political system is kind of moving and the pendulum is swinging, he was kind of ahead of the curve when it came to those things. So he really looks at the whole individual, and being in his courtroom on a daily basis almost, you really learn from that.
Thank you, Mr. Aceves. Ms. Molina?
The judge that inspires me the most is Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor, because she said that it is our duty as attorneys, as professional, educated people, to represent the underrepresented, to make sure that they get social justice, both economic and legal justice. And that is what inspires me to want to become a judge. Also Thurgood Marshall, because he fought to make sure that everybody had justice. And the other judge that I really admire is Judge Stansel, because she has compassion when she has people in front of her. If she needs to deport somebody because the law does not allow them to stay, she thanks them for the contribution, and she apologizes because she cannot do anything. And when the individual has to leave, he leaves with dignity, and he feels good about his decision. It doesn't feel broken. And I think that we need judges who have compassion to understand and give that touch of humanity when they're in the courtroom.
Thank you, Ms. Molina. Mr. Ribbons?
Yes, I practice both in federal and state court, so one of my role models is Federal Judge Consuelo Marshall. And the reason why is not only is she very prepared, but she's very scholarly in her decisions, and she really listens to the attorneys and the parties and makes a very reasoned decision. In the state court, I appear in many, many courtrooms. Of late, I would say that Judge Linfield brings to mind a very well-educated jurist. He gives the time. He can be persuaded if you have a very reasoned argument, as well as paying attention to the facts. Also Judge Rosenberg in Santa Monica, and his style is a little bit different. He goes out of his way to help the attorneys move the case along, save the client's money by avoiding motions or unnecessary motions, and trying to move the cases along as quickly as possible while achieving justice.
Thank you, Mr. Ribbons. Ms. Zizka?
Thank you. Well, my role model is David Wesley. He's a former presiding judge of Los Angeles Superior Court, and I consider him to be my mentor. He appointed me to the first realignment court in the state. So he took really, with collaboration, we built the system where parole hearings were really in a room in the prison, and brought them into the courthouse and gave protections to parolees that included the right to counsel and a full hearing in a court of law, and gave them those Article 6 protections under the California state constitution. So the whole role was really expanded. And that's where we brought in, at the county level, all these services, because in part it was a consent decree that the state prisons had to be depopulated. So Judge Wesley took a leadership role, formed committees and task forces to see that everyone was talking to each other so that we could provide the services that needed to be provided for successful reintegration. Also, I'm so pleased to be part of Judge Wesley's teen court team. He's been doing this for 24 years. It's highly successful. I think he would love to put the reins over to someone else. It also includes the Shades program, which includes hate crimes, and those teen jurors go to the Museum of Tolerance for 5 days and get training. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zizka. Ms. Archuleta?
Yes, well, I actually have 5 judges that I have watched over my career of 25 years that I view as role models. One of them is Judge Tynan. He runs a very successful drug court program in downtown Los Angeles, where he shows a lot of compassion as a judicial officer. He is very respectful of the litigants, and it's actually a pleasure to go into his court and watches how he deals professionally day in and day out with people with significant drug issues and addiction issues. Also, retired Judge Janice Croft. I appeared in front of her for many years in Pasadena. She was very tough but very fair. She always treated everyone with respect, and she was one of the first female judges that I appeared in front of during the course of my career, and I watched her over the years, and she had the respect of all the parties that came before her. Judge Pounders from downtown is retired. He used to sit on the 9th floor. He would do some of the most significant, serious cases in the county. Judge Peter Espinoza, as my colleague Mr. Aceves discussed, I've actually talked to Judge Espinoza already and asked him that I'd like some guidance from him on the college program that he's very involved in. And lastly, Judge Robert Mackey. He was a judge 23 years ago that I appeared in front of, and I had never given one thought about being a judge. He was a former football player at UCLA, African-American gentleman, and I thought if I ever was a judge, I wanted to be like Judge Robert Mackey when I grew up. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Archuleta. Before our next question, I'll encourage the candidates to please speak closely to their microphone so they can all be heard. The next question will be asked by Ejaz Brooks, a member of the Political Science Student Association.
If you become a judge, what would you look for in a clerk?
And the first person to answer this question will be Mr. Aceves.
Well, being in the courtroom every day and being in a lot of different courtrooms, you've had the experience to see a lot of clerks. And I would really want someone who's highly qualified and has a lot of experience doing the clerk position. I think as a starting judge, you want someone who can actually help you. The clerks really have a very important role to play in the courtroom, and a lot of the work that they do is basically, the orders that the judge gives. They need to basically put them down and make sure that everything is on that computer. I would also look for someone who treats people nicely. From my perspective, as a judge, I plan to, be welcoming to everyone, be respectful of everyone, and I would expect my staff to do the same. Unfortunately, sometimes you get some clerks who aren't, very approachable. So I would definitely look for competence and someone who's pleasant to work with.
Thank you, Mr. Aceves. Ms. Molina.
Obviously, I would want somebody who's competent and someone who is a hard worker. But I think most important is their disposition, how they treat people, how they engage with the audience, whether they have patience, because they are the gatekeepers to the court. And you want to make sure that the individuals that are coming before them, they're already nervous and they're already anxious. And so you want to be treated nicely, respectfully, and you want someone who is going to make them feel at ease in such a terrible moment that they're going through. And obviously, they need to make sure that they know what they're doing so that they can be of assistance to me.
Thank you, Ms. Molina. Mr. Ribbons.
Well, I'm going to echo what my colleagues have said. First and foremost, as somebody that's welcoming, the judicial system can be very daunting even for attorneys. And the last thing that I would want as a judicial officer is to have a clerk that is not personal and welcoming to the people coming into the court. In order to get respect, you have to earn respect, and I think it starts with the clerk. As the attorneys and the litigants walk into the courtroom, many of them have questions, how to navigate that particular courtroom for that judge, or issues that come up, or assistance that's needed in order to get their case moved forward in an expedient manner and fair to all. I also would be looking for someone that is organized and able to assist me to get my job done. Many times court orders are bogged down in the court system, whether it's because the judicial officer or the clerk, they just don't get out in a timely manner. And I think that's important so that we don't keep the litigants waiting. Doesn't matter whether it's criminal or civil, it's important to get the information out, and the rulings need to be moved forward in an expedient manner.
Thank you, Mr. Ribbons. Ms. Zuzga.
Well, I would love to have my clerk remain with me if I'm elevated to a judgeship. Shanika, she embodies all these qualities that have been mentioned. Also, presiding over a court, there has to be a good relationship between the bailiff and the clerk. So I'm very fortunate to have that because I work in a court that there's a high degree of interaction with the public in traffic court. So if my regular bailiff's not in, Ms. Shanika will address the public and basically let them know what the court procedures are. She's very professional. She's educated. She helps me out. She's my right hand. She's the face of my court. She flags cases for me that have complex issues or things that I need to remember to place on the docket. So I can't think of anyone better qualified for the job than the clerk that I have now, and I thank her every day for her service.
Thank you, Ms. Ziska. Ms. Archuleta.
Yes, I think one of the most important qualities that a clerk should possess is patience, not only with me prospectively as a new bench officer, but in dealing with the public, because it's been previously echoed, many times the clerk is the gatekeeper. People come into the court, they don't know why they're there or why they're supposed to be there or if they're even in the right courtroom. And I think that patience and also someone that treats all the parties, be it the attorneys, the litigants, the victims, the witnesses, the police officers, the advocates for mental health example, they all need to be treated respectfully. I also would need someone that is experienced. I've actually had several people say, oh, Deborah, if you get elected judge, I'd love to come and be your clerk. So I've been privileged to have people come up and approach me about that because I would appreciate their experience that they would certainly bring to the job. I always felt that it was the most important person to make happy in the courtroom was the clerk, because the judge is going to rule based on the law before he or she and make rulings appropriately. But when you have a clerk who's in your corner, it makes doing jury trials much more smooth, getting witnesses in and out of court. There's just a higher level of cooperation, and I think ultimately the integrity of the system functions better when you have that kind of cooperative spirit amongst the courtroom personnel. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Archuleta. Mr. Schreiner.
Thank you. I would echo a large part of what the other candidates have said. As a new judge, as a judge in any situation, you want to have a clerk that's experienced, one who knows the minutia of the job, and one who has the demeanor for it. You know, I've been working in the courts for 29 years now. I've seen a lot of clerks, have done a lot of trials. And one of the things that I know is that even if I get elected and become a new judge, it's still a new thing. So you want to have a clerk who has the experience and knows the minutia, and I've seen it, you know, with other situations before where they can say, Judge, you didn't do this, you missed that, because you're not going to know every aspect of the job. So it's critical to have that. Also, having appeared in many courts over the last 29 years, one of the things that we're all familiar with is going up against that clerk who is just has the personality that's just completely off-putting. And you got to have somebody who can deal with the public, who can deal with the attorneys who are coming in at the same time, because you want to create a situation where everybody has fair access to justice and they're not being shut down by the clerk before they even get to the court. But it's a critical role, and it's a good question too. It's a very important decision for each of us to make.
Thank you, Mr. Schreiner. Our next question will be asked by Erlen Narajos, and Ms. Molina will answer first.
Hello. If, as a judge, you felt a law affecting the courts was wrong, what action would you take to influence the law?
Well, if I felt that the law was incorrect, I would need to see if there was something that I could do as in my role as a judge, because a judge is limited in what they can do. But if there was room, I would push the boundary to the limit of what I can do within my role, because I think it's important that as judges, we try to create change if it's possible. Like I said, we have to be careful that I would push the boundaries, because that's how you get change in the judicial system, just like all the different programs that have come before the court. It was somebody pushing the boundaries to try and make a change for the better.
Thank you, Ms. Molina. Mr. Ribbons.
Well, as a judge, you are constrained by the law. Whether I agree with the law or not, as a judicial officer, I'm still bound by it, and I must follow the law. So I can't advocate from the bench a change. However, if I felt that the law was manifestly wrong, I would consult with the other judges and see if we can't influence the legislature to get a change in the law in order to move the the law into a direction that I believed was more appropriate. The legislature is ultimately responsible for making the laws. The judiciary is there to apply the facts to the laws and enforce the laws.
Thank you, Mr. Ribbons. Ms. Zuzga.
I would be required by the judicial canons of ethics as well as the oath that I take to follow the law, even if I felt it was wrong, if there was any room within the U.S. Constitution or the California Constitution that this is a violation of due process or equal protection. Those are some things I could look at in consideration of whether or not to apply the law. In terms of influencing the law and changing the law, that's something that would have to be considered in-house with court counsel to see if we could take an active position on changing the law. So I would have to be in consultation with court counsel as well.
Thank you, Ms. Zuzga. Ms. Archuleta.
Well, I don't want to sound like I'm parroting my colleagues down the table, but obviously when you're a judge, you have to take an oath to follow the laws as they're currently written or existing at the time. I'm sure that everyone in this room takes exception, including judges, sitting judges, commissioners, those that act as judge pro tems. I'm sure that there are all laws that we disagree with. In fact, that's something that when we'd pick juries, for example, we would find out during the voir dire process, there are people that did not believe in certain laws or could not make a decision based on their belief about a certain matter, legal matter. We all have laws that we disagree with, but when you are a judicial officer, you have to take an oath to follow the law. And I'm not sure how far we can become activists from the bench unless, as Ms. Zuzga said, there's a violation of equal protection or due process of the law. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Archuleta. Mr. Schreiner.
Thank you. Well, the short answer to the question, obviously, is as a judge, I would follow the law. That's the oath that you take. That's the role that you have. We're not legislators, we're judges. So if the law is what it is, you follow that law. And we're citizens too, and obviously, as others have said, we have different beliefs, as do all citizens, about what laws are right or correct or appropriate, and there's a role for us to play as citizens there. But as a judge, no, we're there to follow the law as it is, and that's what I would do.
Thank you, Mr. Schreiner. Mr. Aceves.
Well, I agree with what the people here at the table have said, and obviously as a judge, I would be taking the oath and would have to follow the law. There are different avenues that were already talked about in terms of things that could be done outside of a courtroom for the legislature or other bodies to take up issues like that. But once in my courtroom, if the law is the law and you would have to follow it, which is what we ask jurors all the time. There's a lot of people when they come as jurors, that's one of the questions that we ask them. Say, you know, will you follow the law even if you don't agree with it? And they're bound by that, and we're looking for that. We're asking them to do that, so I would, you know, be required to do the same, and I would do that.
Thank you, Mr. Aceves. Is there one question each? Okay, wonderful. So what we will do next is the audience questions. Each member will have 1 minute to answer an audience question. And while I'm waiting for those to be brought up to me, I'll mention that the program is being recorded and will be available on the website of the Pat Brown Institute. So if you missed any of the exciting details, you can watch it there. Once again, if you have questions, please raise your hand and somebody will collect your question. And please make sure that the questions are directed towards the entire group, not just one individual. So the first question is, what do you look for in a juror? And we will have Mr. Ribbons answer first.
Well, it's a great question. As a judge, you're looking for somebody that's impartial. It's really up to the attorneys to pick the jurors. And the attorneys, when they're picking jurors, they're looking for somebody, obviously, that will rule in their favor. As a judicial officer, you want someone that is going to follow the law. You want somebody that is unbiased and can listen to the facts and make a decision applying the facts to the law. That's all the courtroom is about. And it's important that jurors come in with an open mind and they hear the evidence as presented by the attorneys on both sides and render a decision based upon the instructions that are given to them.
Thank you, Mr. Ribbons. Ms. Zizka.
I would like to have a juror who listens. That's the number one role, I believe, is listening to the evidence as it is presented. And basically now, as presiding in court, we have a great challenge as judges, judicial officers, with jurors consulting social media in the jury box and on their own and doing their own research. So I would want someone to follow that law and not use social media, not make comments about the attorneys on Facebook. So I echo Mr. Ribbons' comments. I want somebody that's fair and impartial and that will listen to the evidence and render a just decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zizka. Ms. Archuleta.
Well, I've been a prosecutor and I've tried over 100 jury trials. I've lost track, but it's well over 100, and I will tell you that it's typically the fair and impartial jurors that both sides are looking for, both the prosecution and the defense. Typically, the judge would not excuse a juror unless there's some issue that's brought up by one of the counsel, either the prosecutor or the defense attorney, and then the judges would typically rule on challenges for cause. But judges are not in the activist role necessarily of excusing or accepting jurors. That's usually done amongst the attorneys that are representing the interests of their various clients.
Thanks, Mrs. Archuleta. Mr. Schreiner.
Thank you. As with the others, basically as a judge, you're looking for jurors who are fair and impartial, who will follow the law and the instructions that the court gives them, and that pay attention to the evidence as it comes in. Those are the issues. As the question is phrased, we as judges are not so much looking for jurors as the attorneys for either side are, but as judges, our role is to make certain that the jurors who ultimately sit are fair, and where we're ruling on motions, that is, there are going to be peremptory challenges and challenges for cause. When you're making rulings on a challenge for cause, the ultimate issue is whether or not that is a juror who can be fair. Obviously, either side has their idea of what is better or not so good for them, and they're going to make their challenges based upon those things. But as judges, we want to be sure that they're fair and impartial, that they're paying attention to the evidence as it comes in, that they're listening, and ultimately they will follow the law as given to them by the court.
Thank you, Mr. Schreiner. Mr. Aceves.
Thank you. In one of the previous answers, I said that I really like the style of Judge Marcus and how he deals with jurors. And I think as a judge, I would like to emulate that and really make them feel welcome, because I know as an attorney, I mean, I've tried over 100 trials myself, and you're looking for people who want to be there. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that show up and they don't want to be there. They don't want to be part of the system. And I think it's important for us, incumbent upon us as judicial officers, to stress to them the importance of them being there. And ultimately, the persons that, you know, should be picked by both sides should be someone who's been attentive, someone who's shown that they could be fair and impartial, and someone who could leave their biases at the door. So after going through the question and whatnot, obviously, as a judge, you're not the one picking them, but I would hope that both sides would be looking for that. I know that's what I'm looking for, and that's what I would, you know, expect to see when I'm presiding as a judge.
Thank you, Mr. Aceves. Ms. Molina.
Well, it's all been said, but echoing what everybody said, obviously as a judge, we're not the ones that are really picking, but we want someone who's going to be fair, that's going to be unbiased, someone that's really going to pay attention to the rules, because it is someone's life that's at stake. So we want to make sure that justice prevails. So we're going to hopefully get somebody who's unbiased and make sure that they're fair.
Thank you, Ms. Molina. And now I'll look for our second audience question. So exciting, live questions. Make sure I read it first before I start saying it. Plato once said that the most fit to rule are the ones most reluctant to rule. You all seem very eager to become judge. What do you think will scare you the most when you reach office if you are chosen? And I will start with Ms. Zizka.
Well, for me, I think it would be the very cases where there's so many severe consequences that one may face, such as a defendant charged with the death penalty, and that's something that the judge has to automatically review. So those are very serious decisions that the court would take into consideration. Some of the other cases would be SLAPP, anti-SLAPP statutes. Those are things that I haven't encountered yet, so more complex litigation is something that would be something that I would look at and prepare and do my best, give it sufficient study of all the evidence and come to a just result. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zizka. Ms. Archuleta.
Was a prosecutor as long as I've been a prosecutor and done the kinds of cases that I've done. I've had many cases, for example, with child molesters and sex offenders, where these cases involve very high sentencing structure schemes. And I have to make darn sure before I prosecute someone for those types of cases that I am convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that this person is responsible for that crime before I file the case or try it to a jury. Because I realize that when I prosecute a particular defendant for a case involving a child, that I'm taking that person away from their family, that they might not watch their daughter walk down the aisle or their son graduate from high school. They might not be home for Easter, Thanksgiving, or Christmas dinners. And I have been doing that as a prosecutor for 25 years, and that certainly would not change once I put on a black robe and become a judge. I take that obligation and responsibility very seriously.
Thank you, Ms. Archuleta. Mr. Schreiner.
I think the thing that would scare me a little bit, and is the biggest change, is like several of the people here. I've been a prosecutor for a long time, 29 years, and I have vast courtroom experience, over 200 felony jury trials, 80 of them murder cases, a lot of heavy cases. But when you change from that role as an advocate, which we are, advocates for a side, you're moving into an entirely different role. And that's as the neutral arbiter, making sure that each side gets a fair trial, making sure that the law is applied evenly. So it's a new experience, and it's the newness of that is a bit intimidating. It's the newness of that makes it so critical that you have experience in the courtroom, dealing with the cases, dealing with the facts, so that ultimately you're able, because as judges, you don't know the cases until they come in to you. As advocates, we know the cases, we have the reports, we prepared them, we've worked them up for whatever period of time we can. Ultimately, that's the newness that would affect me.
Thank you, Mr. Schreiner. Mr. Aceves.
As a DA who's done a lot of very serious cases, I understand the role of an advocate. And as a young man, actually as a child who was brought to this country when I was 5 years old, we came to this country because my mom was divorcing. My father had filed for divorce. Even though the courts here had no jurisdiction over her, the feeling of the family in Mexico was that the courts were fair here. And so that's always something that stuck with me. And I've been in the courtroom, I've been there now over 18 years, and I try cases and I see judges. And frankly, what I want to make sure that I do is that I continue to be fair. Although I've been a prosecutor and I handle the most serious of cases, and right now, child molestation cases, I'm fair, and you want to make sure that you continue that. And I think that as a judge, my biggest fear would be that people didn't see me that way, because that's what I intend to do, and hopefully, if given the opportunity, I will.
Thank you, Mr. Aceves. Ms. Molina.
I think what would scare me the most is, as a judge, if I have a client, or not a client, but if I have a defendant in front of me who is being accused of something, to make sure that someone that's innocent is not put away. Also, at the same time, if you have somebody that's done something so bad, to make sure that you give them the right amount of punishment, because you want to make sure that you're tough on crime when it is merit. And so I think it's that fine line of knowing when you need to give somebody a second chance because they made a stupid mistake, and knowing when you need to put somebody away because they're a danger to society. And I think that's a very powerful role that a judge plays that can be scary if you don't have all the facts in front of you.
Thank you, Ms. Molina. If you could hold your applause to the end of the event, I would appreciate it. Thank you so much, but, we're trying to keep things equal for all the candidates, so if you could all hold your applause, appreciate it. Thank you. And, let's see here, Mr. Ribbons.
Well, the short answer is getting it right. Whether it's criminal or civil, people in a courtroom that are litigants are there having judgment passed upon them. And it's very, very important as a judicial officer to get it right. As has been said, when you're dealing with someone's liberty, you want to make sure that you are not taking away their liberty unless it's warranted. If there is an alternative method that can be used and the law recognizes, that needs to be considered when you consider all of the facts. On the criminal side, you have not only the defendants, but you have victims, and you need to make sure that the victims are served justice as well. On the civil side, as trite as it sounds, when your economic livelihood is taken away, it can be very severe, and it is very emotional. So again, my biggest fear is making sure that I get it right, and I will make sure that I take the time to make the right decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Ribbons. Our next question will be answered first by Ms. Archuleta. It's also our last audience question. What do you do to be truly impartial when hearing a case? In other words, what makes you objective? How do you avoid letting your emotions get in the way of thinking when deciding your position? Ms. Archuleta?
A judge cannot be emotional, neither can a prosecutor, because when you are representing the people of the state of California, that's a tremendous responsibility that requires objectivity, impartiality, integrity, honesty, and fairness. The district attorney's office, many of my colleagues up here, we have the responsibility of charging people with crimes and prosecuting them, and ultimately, if warranted, taking away their freedom. You can never let your emotions rule you or run roughshod over you as you are going through the system where you were trying to protect the integrity of the system while also upholding the defendant's rights, even though you are the prosecutor. You have the ethical obligation to seek justice, not to win or lose, and at no time are you allowed to be emotional or unobjective, because that would blind you in your pursuit of justice as a prosecutor and ultimately as a judge.
Thank you, Ms. Archuleta. Mr. Schreiner.
Thank you. Well, I would echo those comments and emphasize that Ms. Archuleta is correct that as DAs we have an ethical obligation. We have to have a good faith belief in the guilt of the person and that we can pursue that case and prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. But we're advocates. And what we have to remember is that as judges, we're not advocates. You don't have a stake in the outcome. You can't allow yourself to want it to come out one way or another, whether guilty or not guilty in a criminal trial or a civil trial, whatever the outcome might be. You don't have a stake in the outcome, and you have to move yourself mentally to that point where your concern is simply make sure that the law is applied evenly, that you make your decisions correctly, and that you do it with independence and with a degree of courage, not worrying about what the ultimate outcome is because you're the neutral arbiter, you're not an advocate.
Thank you, Mr. Schreiner. Mr. Aceves.
I too would be moving from the role of a prosecutor or person presenting on behalf of one side to a judge, and clearly it would be a complete different role. I don't, even now as a prosecutor, we really try to leave our emotions out of it. When you're dealing with the type of cases that I deal with, it's very difficult. It's difficult for the family, it's difficult for all the parties and everyone involved. As a judge, you actually wouldn't ever be deciding the facts of a case other than if you were asked to sit as the finder of fact, meaning you wouldn't have a jury. So at that point, I would clearly follow what's expected of a judge and keep emotions out of it, focus on the facts, and decide based on the facts.
Thank you, Mr. Aceves. Ms. Molina.
Like all my colleagues said, obviously we are not advocates when we're a judge. We're going to look at the facts, and I think it's important that we keep emotions at bay and that we really, really look at just being fair, unbiased, and applying the law to make sure that there's justice. A lot of times you have situations in family law where it can be a very emotional tug, and a judge is going to need to make sure that they just look at the facts and look at what is the best outcome for that case. In family law, it would be the best outcome for the children. And so you have to learn to reserve your emotions and just look at the facts and see what will be the best outcome for the case. In criminal, obviously, you're going to apply the laws and just make sure that you're being fair and unbiased and that it's going to be a just ruling.
Thank you, Ms. Molina. Mr. Ribbons.
Well, I do deal with it several days a month as a temporary judge, taking off my advocate hat and putting on my judge hat in order to render decisions. As all of my colleagues have said, as a judge, you typically, well, you can't bring your emotions into it. You're actively listening to the facts, you're applying the law to the facts, and the outcome should be warranted based upon what you hear, not based upon how you feel. And that is achievable as a bench officer by simply going in, knowing that you are not a stakeholder, knowing that the objective is to make sure that all of the stakeholders in the action get a fair trial or a fair shake at it if you're doing motion practice. And again, you make the decision based on the facts and the law only.
Thank you, Mr. Ribbons. Ms. Ziska.
Before I take the bench every day, I tell myself I'm here to make fair decisions. People are appearing before me so that I can make fair decisions. The plaintiff or the prosecutor has the burden of proof, so there are certain elements that have to be proven. So I take very copious notes on that. Also, I look at the defense side, and I don't find that there's any emotion necessarily involved in making those decisions whether or not the facts fit the law. Sure, there may be people that find themselves in hardship, but regardless of that, each person in court wants to have a full day in court, and they want to be heard, respected, and rendered a fair decision.
Thank you, Ms. Ziska. And now we'll start with the closing statements in reverse order of how the opening statements went. Before we start, I'll mention that the League of Women Voters has provided copies of the voter guide for Los Angeles County, which contains information on the candidates running for supervisor and Superior Court judge, as well as pros and cons discussion of Proposition 50. So please take a copy. More will be available at the Los Angeles Public Library branches and the LA County Public Library branches throughout the county. And don't forget to vote on June 7th. So now we'll start with Ms. Ziska for her closing statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I have been rated as well qualified by the Los Angeles County Bar Association, and it would be a privilege and an honor to serve the community as a Los Angeles Superior Court judge. I have been a commissioner for over 10 years, a prosecutor for over 20 years, so I bring a breadth and depth of experience to the bench. I have prosecuted serious crimes. I would like to open a collaborative justice court to address homelessness and other social issues such as mental health and substance abuse. And I believe that I can do these things as I've shown my skill in opening the first realignment post-conviction parole hearing court in the state. And with 30 years of solid legal experience, I would be, again, honored to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ziska. Mr. Ribbons.
Well, thank you, everyone, for this opportunity to address you on this election. As a civil litigator, and most of us, our interaction with the judicial system is not on the criminal side, it's on the civil side. That could be family law, it could be a business dispute, it could be a landlord-tenant dispute, or as I mentioned, civil harassment earlier, where you have an issue with a neighbor, or in many cases, as those matters come forward, with stalkers. I have the breadth of hearing all of those. I have dealt with and represented both plaintiffs and defendants of all socioeconomic background, so I'm not coming from a one-dimensional background. I've been practicing law for over 20 years. For the last 10 years, I've been a volunteer of the court on the bench, and prior to that, I was a mediator. I'm also an arbitrator, so I have a breadth of knowledge and experience that I believe is well-suited for this office, and I would appreciate your vote.
Thank you, Mr. Ribbons. Ms. Molina.
Well, echoing what Mr. Ribbons said, I think it's important that we have diversity on the bench, even within the legal background. And so I think that when you vote for somebody like myself, you're going to get somebody that has a vast array of experience in different legal fields. I've done immigration, domestic violence, family law, landlord-tenant. So I think when you look at the court, it's not just criminal. There's 9 different areas of law that the court covers. And so you need someone that's going to have compassion, understand the community, understand the working class, and that is going to make sure that justice prevails, and that's going to be compassionate, because in the other courtrooms, you need to have someone who is compassionate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Molina. Mr. Aceves.
I too thank the League of Women Voters and the students for being here and providing us this opportunity. If I may suggest, I would suggest that you think or consider 3 things when making your decisions in terms of who you're going to vote for. One is looking at the qualifications, of the legal qualifications of the individual. Like the 2 people who've already said they were rated well qualified. I too am rated well qualified by the Los Angeles County Bar. And what's important to point out about that is that I don't have any experience sitting as a judge pro tem. My office doesn't allow me to do that. But nevertheless, the Los Angeles County Bar found me well qualified based on my experience as a prosecutor and based on my experience also outside of the courtroom. I was president of the Mexican American Bar Association in 2007. I instituted a legal fair that's been ongoing where it provides free services to thousands of people in the community. So even though I'm not able to do it, I've been able to provide those services through my involvement. And so I think when you put together the whole package in terms of what I bring to the table, that's why I was rated well qualified, and I urge you to vote for me on June 7th.
Thank you, Mr. Aceves. Mr. Schreiner.
Thank you. Like the other trial lawyers here, we generally love doing closing argument, but we hate doing it on the clock, but I'll make it as fast as I can. I, too, went through the process with the LA County Bar, which is important because it's a neutral arbiter that looks at your entire history in an in-depth way. I, too, was rated well qualified for them. That's important. The other thing that I wanted to mention that a lot of us have talked about is our trial experience. That's how you judge whether or not, A, the person has the courtroom experience, and B, whether or not they're going to work hard. Because as a judge, there's no guarantor of that unless you're that kind of person. When I say I've done over 200 felony trials, don't take my word for it, okay? It's on my website, Schreiner for Judge. Every single one of them from trial 1 to 219 is listed. It's an important consideration because that's how you can measure the experience that we've acquired, and that's how you measure whether or not you're going to continue to be a hard worker, which is something that I will promise you if I sit on the bench. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schreiner. Ms. Archuleta.
Courtroom experience is one thing, ladies and gentlemen, but life experience is quite something else. When I was 19 years old, many of you are college students in here, I was the victim of domestic violence. I ended up having a blood clot on the brain. I had brain surgery when I was 21 years old because I had a boyfriend throw me into a wall. From that, I went on to law school, and I've spent 25 years as a prosecutor. I've also been a mother. I've raised 2 kids. I've got a daughter in college, one going off to college in a year. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a daughter. I make decisions every single day. I've tried a lot of gang cases, I've tried rape cases, I've tried murder cases, I've been in the news, I've done it all. But I can tell you, the experience that you need as a judge is not limited to the number of gang members you've locked up or the number of felony trials or what your bar rating is. We've all gotten ratings, we all have our endorsements, we all have our fans, we all have our supporters. But life experience is what counts. And when you work full-time as a mother, as a prosecutor, where you are dealing with all kinds of crimes across a spectrum, that is the kind of experience that the bench needs in LA County.
Thank you,
I ask
Ms.
for your
Archuleta.
vote. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to mention that this series of forums was organized and coordinated by the Pre-Law Society of Cal State LA, the Political Science Association, Criminal Justice Student Association, under the expert direction and motivation of Montserrat Ramirez Mendoza. The League of Women Voters commends the student groups. And also thanks the Pat Brown Institute for Public Affairs for their guidance and support. We extend gratitude to the California Community Foundation for underwriting the snacks and beverages for the evening. But of course, the stars of our show, the candidates, thank you so much for participating in this forum, and thanks in advance to all the other candidates who will also be participating. It's no easy feat to run for office, and we are very grateful that you've taken the time and the energy to be here tonight. Thank you.